our conversation in English today. I apologize if my accent is not perfect, being Italian. And
Il Brexit si riflette anche sul fatto che non si sente niente.
Okay, so thank you for joining us today. My name is Antonella Ciancio. I'm a journalist. I've been for several years with Reuters in Italy, covering economics and financial news and general news and politics. And I'm currently here in Washington, D.C., and I cover transatlantic relations and financial news for several media organizations, including Il Sole 24 Ore in the US and La Stampa in English. We have a tremendous panel. There's a little bit just a little bit of introduction that I'd like to do and to give you for those, the very, very few, probably nobody among us who are not entirely familiar with the history and in particular with the incredible passion for Europe and politics that Enrico Letta has and what he represents today. Maybe some of you have already read his book, which is Contro venti e maree, Against Winds and Tides, Idee sull'Europa e sull'Italia, Ideas on Europe and Italy. And this is a particularly timely book. It's not an instant book. It can be read probably in 10 years, and we're still going to find valuable lessons. But the time to discuss about this book is incredibly important for everything that is going on right now. And it's very nice to have actually Enrico connected from Paris and our friend Renzo Cianfanelli, who's been a veteran correspondent for Il Corriere della Sera in many countries, connected from London. These two cities are now at the center of crucial political developments, not only for their own countries, but for the entire continent and for transatlantic relations. So I will just keep 1 second just to say that Letta, his passion for politics and Europe, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, started when he was very, very young. There's a lot of debate today about young leaders, and probably he was genuinely one of them. And at the age of 32, he became Minister of European Affairs, and that well before he was actually Prime Minister of Italy at the age of 47 between 2013 and 2014. And he can explain to us at the end of our conversation how this transition from politics into now his role as Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po in Paris. What is the connection that he can find? What are the lessons that he can give us, compared to his entire experience and his expectations for the future? So I will just start introducing quickly Carlo Cottarelli, who many of you know, and he's Executive Director, International Monetary Affairs, International Monetary Fund. He's a brilliant economist, a great expert of debt, which is probably the biggest issue that we have in Italy. We really enjoy having him here today because we will hope that we can also ask questions to Enrico, and then we will have a lively conversation between all of us. So, Enrico, can you hear us well?
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And,
thank you.
Hello from Paris.
Fantastic. So, Enrico, I will try to ask you if you could introduce the key lessons, some few themes that we have to keep in mind today as we develop our conversation, some few important issues that we will have tried to remember as we go on, and obviously which are also at the heart of your book.
the first one maybe is the reason why I decided to write this book. This book is around a period in which, and my idea was to react to this terrible, horrible, I would say 2016. When I say horrible 2016, I say an year in which Brexit and Trump were two events completely different, one from the other one, but two events linked because they were both against Europe, both against the European integration, both against the idea of integration among European countries as the main core of the activity of our countries. Brexit and Trump were and are, as we know very well, completely separated issues, but from what I think, there are in the two events some similarities, and these similarities, I tried to interpret these similarities in the relationship with Europe. And it's not by chance that 2016 has been considered the horrible year for Europe, for the European integration. And so I decided to write this book exactly in the two mornings European time, in which we wake up and we, after one night being almost sure about two normal results in the UK and in the US, then we woke up with exactly the other way around and the other point. And the point around two different solutions and what happened in the UK and US with all the consequences to Europe. And with the idea that 17 would have been the year of the continuity of these two big events, anti-European integration events, and with the idea of, for the first time in our lives, having Europe as a mortal, I would say, architecture, a mortal issue, with the possibility to have an end and to stop, to collapse, to have new disgregation, new disruptors, new countries leaving the European Union, countries leaving the Euro and the Euro area. So 17 started as a year with a sort of crossroad, the possibility to be continuity with this 17, with this 16, this horrible year, with Europe in a mess, and with the possibility to have collapse of the European Union. Or the other way around, in which the possibility to have a relaunch of the European integration was exactly linked to this threat, to the external threat that Brexit and Trump had towards European integration. And the main issue, the aim of the book, the core of the book, is exactly this link between a 16 horrible year, external threat, and the possibility for Europe to die. And 17, and that was my aim, sort of a call for a surge, pro-European surge in Europe, to say is the only possibility to avoid death of the European Union, and the idea also to say the European Union can't work business as usual. We have to renew, we have to relaunch, and my point is that Brexit and Trump, of course, I'm not happy because of Brexit and Trump. I'm very sad because of both, but I have to say that today both these events are the greatest opportunity for the European integration. I'm so sorry for our American friends, but I think we have to add Donald Trump to the holy trinity of the European Union founders, Jean Monnet, Schuman, Adenauer, De Gasperi, and Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump today had such a great influence for the relaunch of the European integration, And that was the aim of the book. The book is written originally in Italian and was out before Macron's election in France. Now I am finalizing the text in French and in Spanish. In September we will have the translation into Fayard in France and Planeta in Spain, and so it would be the second half of this work. So the idea is 17 year of the relaunch because of what happened in 16, and Brexit and Trump as a big fool, big external threat, and frankly speaking, I'm happy today because I see the European Union on a new track, a new mood. The European flag is becoming today cooler than it was some months ago. Macron used the European flag as a electoral campaign flag. That was, I think, the first time since many years, and he won. So I think it is a great point. So I think I was supposed just to tell you some words to summarize the aim of the book. So is a battle book. Is a book for a passion battle in this very period, and I'm very happy because I had the opportunity through the book to have many meetings in Italy, and I will have the same in France and Spain in September, October. It is the way to say to the Europeans, hey, look, we have a problem and we risk to lose the most important achievement of many generations. And I, in the book, I clearly said, I'm not happy with the European Union as it is today. There are many failures, many problems, many lack of accomplishment, but we risk to lose everything if we continue with this nationalist mood, populist mood. So we have to relaunch, and we have to avoid the status quo. So maybe today, after Macron, the main risk is to say, okay, game over with populism. Well done, and now we continue business as usual. It would be a disaster to continue business as usual. We have absolutely to relaunch and to have a new track towards the European integration. So I'm so sorry to have given to you this idea so positive of Donald Trump, but it is exactly what I perceive from here.
That's really appreciated. Thank you so much. And thank you also for giving us a few points of discussion. And you're free after our interaction to also ask questions to Enrico, who I only want to say he will have to leave us in about 55 minutes. So we will try to keep it short and very dynamic. But before that, I would like to ask Carlo Cottarelli to give us kind of the same perspective, but from his own point of view, which is obviously related mostly to our economy and for the Eurozone, for Europe without UK, obviously, and Italy. And what are the main defining moments that we're facing right now in the continent?
Thank you very much. It is, of course, a great pleasure for me to be here today to comment on Enrico's book, a book that really manages to summarize in just a few pages virtually all aspects of the challenges the European countries are currently facing in building an economically and perhaps also politically united Europe. It is a book that I read it from the beginning to the end, just without interruption. It's a page turner. It's very interesting. I would encourage you to read it all. And I'm very happy to hear that it will be available also in other languages other than Italian, in addition to Italian. Because of the nature of the issues addressed, of course, the book deals both with political and economic aspects of European integration. I will focus in my remarks especially on economic issues. However, this said, a key question we have been facing in building a united economic area is similar to the one that we are facing in building a common political area, and can be formulated in this way. We all agree, I think we all agree, and it's very clear from the book, that Europeans share common historical and economic values, and that we would be stronger politically and economically if we stood together. Economically, we believe in free and open markets. We are not countries that are rich of commodities. We are all importers of, more or less, net importers of commodities. We believe in a fairly high degree of economic solidarity. We believe in a welfare state to a different extent, but we all in Europe have pretty sizable welfare states. We all have aging populations, and we also have in Europe fairly large union movements that you don't find as developed in other countries of the world. So we have many things in common economically. Politically, as Enrico notes, for example, on pages 75 to 80 of the book, we share common values, common political values. Democracy, gender equality. We dislike the death penalty, as it has been clearly mentioned also in the book. We respect the environment, so on and so forth. So we are similar. The real question, however, is whether we are sufficiently similar to stand together. Yes, as I said, we would all benefit from standing together. The book is very convincing about this fact. But are we ready to stand together fully, or are we still too different? And most of all, would living closer together lead to further convergence or to further divergence? I think that's the key issue. Would the proximity, closer proximity, make us more divided? And when it comes to economics, there are clearly pretty large economic differences across European countries, even in the euro area. The different attitude towards public finances and public debt is a good example. We have different attitudes towards different degrees of tolerance of public debt across euro area countries. Another key issue is the different degree of tolerance with respect to inflation. Especially in the past, between 2000 and 2007, inflation rates were very different within the euro area, which led to pretty large developments in competitiveness within the euro area, and pretty large developments, pretty different developments in current account balances. The same also applies to fiscal balances. And these are the weaknesses, these divergent behaviors. These are the weaknesses that gave rise to the 2011 and 2012 crisis. The issue that I would therefore like to put on the table today is what we can do, whether we share this problem that the diversities are still too large, and what we can do to accelerate the process of economic convergence. I believe this is necessary, absolutely necessary for the well-functioning of the economic and monetary union. I have to say I'm relatively optimistic about the future, because I think that the limited convergence that we have seen, particularly between 2000 and 2007, we are still paying the consequences of that lack of convergence. In a way, I would call them teething problems. So not permanent feature of the... I don't believe the story of the fact that Europe is not an optimal currency area because we have fundamentally different cycles. I think we started with the wrong foot. We started in the wrong way, and between 2000 and 2007, we accumulated imbalances. In terms of stocks, the imbalances are still there. In terms of flows, I think we converged a lot. Now it's the time of dealing with these stocks, particularly in terms of competitiveness and differences in fiscal balances. I'll stop here.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Which is an interesting point also, that this focus between 2002, 2006 that you mentioned, and then we would come back to the macroeconomic issues, because there are a couple of chapters in the book. And Enrico specifically identifies as an example of the benefits of the euro for the Eurozone, and how I think you saw also the chart that is published in the book, Carlo, and that is, it's a kind of like benchmark, between Maastricht and after Maastricht, in terms particularly of
public
debt.
debt.
Exactly, in terms of the increase of public debt.
Yes.
Probably we're going to have a little bit of your view on that specific issue. If I don't know if we have Renzo connected right now. Otherwise, I will move with one question. It's still broad, but then we're going to narrow. I remember when I was covering then President Letta here in Washington in October 2013. He was at Brookings Institution. He had met with President Obama in the morning at the White House. And in his speech, he said something that is still relevant today, but I will ask, is still relevant today? So is Europe needs a strong leadership. Is it still true today, and how that can be achieved given the different patterns that we are seeing now taking shape in different countries?
I think it's more true today than it was 4 years ago about leadership, because the positive accomplishment that we have towards us, this roadmap with the completion of the economic and monetary union on the one hand, on the other hand, security and defense, the two main issues. I think after the German elections, these two pillars will be the two main chapters of a big book. The big book will be the roadmap for the relaunch of the European integration. To succeed in these two main points of the European relaunch, we need leadership at European level. I think we have today one big new leader. Monsieur Macron is one of them, and I try to be very objective. I think only in the period of François Mitterrand, we had a president of the Republic from France so strong and so powerful in terms of legitimacy, first of all, in terms of link between the strength of the presidents of the Republic in France and his strength in the Parliament, because we have today a situation in which Macron has really the support of his country for the next years, with the support of his Parliament. So we wait now for the rest. The rest is Germany, and of course Italy and Spain too. So we need the answer for these other countries. I think the signal from Germany are interesting signals, because AfD is decreasing and it has been marginalized in the polls until now, so it can be interesting. And if I may say, in Germany, we never had such a terrific couple leaders from CDU and SPD, the most pro-European couple of leaders Germany ever had, because they are both European.
Yeah, they can see it, they can hear, but I don't hear you. I can talk
Merkel today is not Merkel of 12 years ago, I would say. Merkel of 12 years ago was less pro-European than Merkel today. And Merkel today, after the refugee crisis, is really a pro-European and a European leader. And the same I can say also for Martin Schulz.
Mi dispiace, ma qua l'impressione che non abbiamo
possible
molto
leader.
avanti.
Sorry, Enrico.
Who is a very
Enrico, sorry, one
No, ho
second.
detto che questo
Enrico, I have to stop you just one second because we may not listen to you
Siamo
clearly.
raccomandati.
And just to give us
pure riflesso.
just one second
Perché
to
mette
tell, I
questo
don't know if I want to
lucchettino,
check
che
with
ci voleva come c'era prima,
Renzo is
che
not
mi
listening
diceva
to
che
us.
col
Okay,
fatto
sorry.
che
You may
faccio-
proceed. Sorry, because we were
Poi,
trying to manage the two
bella
connections.
scelta.
But your latest thought. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, yes, Merkel,
E poi l'audio non c'è.
Schulz,
Che
Germany
facciamo?
seems to
Togliamo
be
il video e facciamo solo
a
l'audio.
very
Quindi,
good
sì.
track, very positive track in that direction. And I think so. We can at European level, this Franco-German situation can seem to be
Come dicono a
improved
Milano.
in terms of European leadership and European
Poi adesso però
legitimacy.
è
We have
si sente lo speaker, no?
in Southern Europe, the main point is about the future of Southern Europe, and then I joined very much the point of Carlo Cottarelli, and I take the opportunity to thank Carlo for being with us today and for what he said about the book, of course. But he said a very, very crucial point. It's about divergence and convergence. Because it is true that the main problem is that we can have common values, but we can also diverge having common values. So the main point about how to build a European architecture so is a problem of tools. A European architecture working towards convergence and not divergence is, I think, the main aim of the next decisions. The next decisions, first of all, about the completion of the economic
No, adesso sì, si vede che loro parlano.
are the main point in which we will judge
no volume,
the success or not of the Macron presidency and of the post-Macron
No, sounded perfect. So it was perfect then.
with
Let's see.
the European
Fraudulent what was it?
integration based
Allow them.
on a
Maybe we
strong
can-
economic
we have to- No,
union
but it's
and
so long.
also
Allow
strong
them.
monetary union, we can
Yes.
have some hopes for the future. The main problem is that until now, and that was the reason
That was
why
what we
we
did
had this
before to get it
divergence
going,
during
so
the
that's
crisis,
done.
we had a strong
So we
M,
want
a
to go, I
big
think we
M,
want to go to
and a
sound.
very small E. A big
Enrico, sorry if I have to interrupt, but we're gonna come back to some of these issues because we have Renzo connected, and it's been a bit difficult with him in London to properly hear him and for him to hear us. But I think we can ask Renzo if somebody can call him with Chiara here to eventually just give us a little a short thought contribution from London about his perception of the political situation in the country and how that, not only Brexit, but the negotiations about Brexit, are we heading towards a soft Brexit or towards a Brexit at all? I mean, this is a bit of a stretch, but it's not so clear, the situation there, and it's inevitably is going to have an impact for all of us in terms of United States and Europe and other regions. So if Renzo if Renzo can hear us, that or somebody can contact him, I would ask him to give us a couple of minutes of his view from London. Otherwise, we will move forward anyway. So.
Seems that London is working.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you, Renzo. So I was just
Wonderful.
asking. I don't know if you can hear me. What's interesting is
No, I
about
can
you.
hear you very well.
Fantastic. What's interesting
Good.
about you being London is your perspective on the political developments there. What is happening, and what do you think will most likely happen with Brexit, with negotiations, with the coalition, with Conservative and the Northern Ireland Party, and what is going to happen? What is this going mean for the rest of Europe and the United States?
Well, to put it shortly, nobody knows. Just to give you a practical example, yesterday, 2 of the 4 ministers of the ridiculously called Department for Brexit have resigned. One, in fact, has been sacked by Mrs. May, who is still the Prime Minister. Nobody knows. They make jokes. They say, after May comes June. After June, which is almost finished, maybe May will be gone. Anyway, so they claim that to be ready to start negotiations in 2 or 3 days. I don't need this phone. But this is something that a number of observers do not agree with. They don't think that this is possible because the staff is not there. And so this will weaken, of course, the position of the United Kingdom, but it will also create problems for the Europeans. In fact, the French, I heard, president said, in a friendly spirit, well, the door is open in case you change your mind. I respect your will. At least this is what he said to the British. And then, of course, it depends on the British government. So this is one point. As for the rest, the British economy is already in a stagnation, and the property market has dropped about 10% in value, because of course investors are very concerned. Probably the British, as they say, they'll wing it. Wing it means they will improvise and hope for the best. It might work, or it might not. This is the situation from London.
And thank you, Renzo. I hope you can still hear me. I would like you to ask a question to Enrico. You know that he's now in Paris right now. I hope you could get some of the things he said. He started our debate putting in comparison Brexit and Trump as 2 major disruptive and events, let's say so, for the world, and especially also for Europe. But since he's such as you know, a passionate observer and expert in himself of Europe, what question do you have for Enrico? Renzo, if you can hear me.
What question do I have? Well, the question is, I believe that the most clear-headed stateswoman in this case is Angela Merkel, because she said this is an opportunity and the opportunity to move ahead. This is what, in my humble experience, should be done. They should set in motion the process of, trying to transform the European Union into a political union. Now, question to Enrico Letta, who, of course, is far more distinguished than all the other speakers, except Cottarelli, whom I appreciate because I have a degree in monetary economics, so I know what is said. About Enrico, what do you think? Is it feasible that the European project, which is paralyzed effectively, will take off all of a sudden under the pressure of the British exit?
Thank you, Renzo, for your point and also for your previous ideas that I completely share. There's one point that is, for what I think, a very interesting opportunity for the European Union from Brexit. That is, there are many issues. There's one issue that is a true and typical political issue. That is the destiny of the 73 present UK members of the European Parliament. Because today there are 73 members of the European Parliament from the UK. Brexit and these seats will be without the British representatives in the next elections. So in 19, we have to decide how to redistribute these seats. It is impossible to cancel them because the final number, 751, is written in the Lisbon Treaty, so we can't just cancel these 73 UK members. And there are two options. The first option, that is for what I think the worst one, is to redistribute in a sort of nightmare market among the different countries these 73 seats. You can imagine the bloody situation with five asking for Belgium asking to have the same number of Netherlands, Italy, Spain, France, Germany, Malta, Cyprus. I think it would be terrible, and it would be a very bad image of what Europe is today, without any true change. The big opportunity is to transform the 73 British representatives in European member of parliament. When I say European member of parliament, I say 73 elected in a pan-European constituency. So elected from Palermo to Helsinki, from Dublin to Cordoba, mixing candidates in the lists and mixing the votes of the voters. It would be fantastic, I think. It would create for the first time a European debate, and we would vote for a European idea. Because today, until now, the European elections, the election of the European Parliament, are national elections. We always vote for a national conjunctural situation. We vote in favor or against the government in charge in the very moment, and so on and so forth. The idea is to have a true European election. It is not impossible. I think it's a good idea. I would like to hear contra-deductive arguments, because the idea to redistribute these seats among countries is completely, I think, useless, stupid. It will create a situation with many disputes and many problems. So my immediate reaction to what Renzo said, and I think his point was very good, and is easily, we can easily combine Renzo's point with what Carlo said. There's an economic convergence need, but there's also a political point that is so crucial today. But for both, we need leaderships. And today, I repeat, we have this new French situation that is very encouraging, very important, very positive. We wait for the Germans. Signals are positive. But of course, if I may say, my country, our country, Italy, is so crucial. We never had in European history important steps, improvement and achievement without Italy on board. We just had one, Schengen. That was the only main achievement of the European Union in which Italy was not on board at the very beginning. And I would like to add for our Italian audience that not being on board at the beginning obliges you to have the double, the triple effort to join in a second time. So it is absolutely not positive not being on board in a multi-speed situation at the very beginning. So Italy's
if I may, I
the
think
next
this is a
future
very
is
valid political
on board
point, what Enrico
since the
has
beginning,
just
and to be in a leadership
exposed.
position to.
Now the
in this
question is, as far as Italy is concerned, Italy is
Renzo,
not
you have
really
something to add.
in a very clear-headed frame of mind right now. There is lots of uncertainty. There are some people who, talk, being, I say bluntly, economically illiterate, who don't know anything about the economy, and they say things that don't make sense, like, let's go back to the lira, let's have a dual currency. I mean, any first-year student of economics knows the Gresham law. It still exists. It's totally ridiculous. And unfortunately, the public opinion in Italy is poorly informed, and I must say, as a journalist, that the media are doing a very poor job. They don't really make the essential points clear. I am reduced to reading the Financial Times.
And so, Renzo, let me take your
Both privilege to live, passes for a Marxist or communist news organ, and of course it's ridiculous.
Renzo, let me take advantage of your point of view to ask
Will it see
Carlo.
the light,
I don't know if
or
you
will it
listen
just
to
go back to
It's okay.
its notorious parochial attitude and waste an opportunity? Because any crisis is an opportunity.
Let me just go back to Carlo about this. Not
Maybe
especially.
I would say the question can also pose to Cottarelli, because again, this problem of the reform of the International Monetary Fund has been discussed for decades. I remember as a student, piani di riforma del Fondo Monetario. This was my doctor's degree with Luigi Spaventa. Very little has been done. Is there a hope that the euro, which was of course like building a house starting from the roof, will be completed?
For Carlo to answer your question then.
About the IMF, the reform of the
Yeah.
IMF. But the one key issue, obviously, for the IMF and Europe is the European representation at the IMF. We are now represented by several executive directors, which is certainly not optimal. There are some who believe that this is not a problem. We coordinate. I can tell you, having seeing things from the inside, the fact that we are not represented by a single executive director is still a major issue. Unfortunately, we don't speak with a single voice in spite of the efforts of coordination. It is unfortunate also that in spite of the push from the Commission and in spite the best intention of some countries like Italy, we seem to have difficulties in moving towards a single representation. And very often, unfortunately, I have the feeling that the people who sit at the board, they put the interest of their own country ahead of the interest of Europe as a whole. So it is something that we need to make quite a lot of further progress on this. Can I ask a question to Enrico?
Yes, absolutely.
I wanted to ask a question that relates to education. Actually, I had two questions. The first one is about education. The book talks a lot about the need for cultural change, and I would like to hear Enrico's views about the role that education can play across Europe to foster the convergence of our European soul. When I was at school, 50 years ago, I remember that at middle school, we were asked to write essays about Europe, about the importance. I don't think this is done anymore. I think it would be very important to start again from the school to teach that Europe is very important for all of us. The second question I had was about a very difficult point relating to the relationship between Germany and Europe. Again, there is a lot of this in the book. Everybody wants to have, in a way, the leadership of Germany in Europe, and at the same time we are afraid that Germany would take over. So if you could also, Enrico, tell us a bit more how you see the role of Germany, I think it would be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. Maybe first point about education. Education is my job today, so I am, of course, very much interested in improving, in engagement, in investing on the topic. And there's a strict relationship between education and Europe. We have to launch, this is what I wrote in the book, a great Erasmus plan for schools. What we do usually for universities, we have to extend to all the students at school I think it could be very important. We have today the possibility for students at school to have a sort of mini Erasmus, but is really a sort of niche possibility for a small group of students. The main point is to give the possibility of all European families to have something positive coming from the European Union. Because if we have the flag, the positive flag of Erasmus as the only positive flag of the European Union for the people, as for many it is today, we risk to say that Erasmus is only for university students, but university students are a very privileged category in our societies. So the big point is how to help those who are not among these privileged categories. There's this big discussion about people in and people out, cosmopolitan people and not cosmopolitan people in our societies, people speaking 3 languages and people speaking the dialect of their region and not 3 languages. And the idea that we have to avoid the, if I may say, Brexit approach. When I say Brexit approach, I say that, as you know very well, the Brexit distribution of the vote was very clearly countryside in favor of Brexit, main cities in favor of Remain. And the main point is to avoid that this cleavage can be the same in Europe too. So cosmopolitan people for Europe, not cosmopolitan people against Europe. We have to combine and we have to create a situation in which the European Union can be perceived as positive also by the non-cosmopolitan part of our societies, also by those who don't speak 3 languages. I insist on this point because it is one of the key issues, and this is why education. On the point on Germany, the second question of Carlo, I think on Germany there are 2 problems. One, I think the Germans, they have to be more aware of their role, of the fact that the rest of Europe is convinced that they are too powerful, Europe, and the rest of Europe is convinced that they are running Europe, and they are running Europe alone. In fact, it is not true, and I think what is the demonstration of that is the ECB and Draghi's leadership at the ECB, because Draghi shows us that it's possible to be leader of the most important, or one of the most important European institutions, deciding and taking decisions with Germany in minority. Because we know very well that several times the German representative in the board of the ECB is against what Draghi is doing on quantitative easing, and he's marginalized in a minority position. So it is not true that Germany is almighty. It is not true that Germany is running everything. It is true that Germany has a crucial role and had, for what I think, a negative role in the period of the crisis, because Germany was a sort of brake to achieve some of the most important reforms very quickly. Banking union, ESM, and all the different aspects of the treaties of the year 12. It was the reason of the blockage, the break from the Germans, was the reason why we wasted so much money during this period. It would have been better with these decisions taken 2 years before or 3 years before. So the same is for today. We need to have the ESM transformed in a sort of, sorry, Carlo, to say that, in a sort of European monetary fund. We need to complete the banking union. We need to complete the rest of the monetary union. And on this point, we need to have Germany in a positive approach, not to have Germany trying to avoid the completion of these reforms. And of course, the other main point, we need Germany thinking to a continuity in the Draghi's leadership of the ECB. The idea to have, after Draghi, the opposite of Draghi as leader of the ECB, I think for all of us is very complicated to think. So it is important to consider this point. This is why Germany is so important, but this is why we have with them to establish and to discuss some positive aspects. Macron and Italy, for what I think, have the keys to convince them. And the keys are in the word accountability. If we are accountable in our own national budgets, first the French, second we the Italians, we can convince them to have some sort of mutualization and to have this completion. Macron plays a very important role. Macron is the fourth president after Chirac, Sarkozy, and Hollande, going to Berlin and saying to the German Chancellor, I will reform my country and I need flexibility during the period in which I reform my country. Then I will have budgetary discipline. The previous three failed in reforming and having budgetary discipline at the end of their period. So Macron today has the key, because Macron can convince Germany that he is serious in having reforms and having the respecting disciplinary budget discipline. And of course, the same is for Italy, and we have to be accountable. This is why in the book, the only, as you mentioned before, Antonella, the only slide I put in the book is the slide on the debt. Just to remind us that it is not true that we didn't profit from the euro. The main profit for the fact that we are the only European country able to stabilize the debt because of Maastricht. Before Maastricht, the debt raised 221% in 2 decades. After Maastricht, the debt raised only 7% in the same 2 decades. And I think it is a very important point. You know, Antonella, when I discussed the book around Italy, this point is the point that shocks me always, because I had the feeling when I say that, when I show this figure, that people, they don't trust these figures. And they think that I'm saying something that is lunar, that is absolutely not existing. It is a sort of fake news. Because in Italy, the largest part of the public opinion simply doesn't know that this is the truth. And there's idea that on debt, on the other aspect, the story is completely different. That was at the end of these first 2 months of discussions around the book. My bad impression of the situation is exactly this very strange feeling with this slide, page 48, if I'm not wrong.
Thank you, Enrico. That's fantastic. Let me just go back just right away to Carlo, because I think it's a topic. I was seeing Carlo nodding or being interested in what Enrico was saying about the idea of having. It's a bit. I don't think it's a real proposal, is it? The idea of having a European monetary fund, is that how can this subject can even be imagined, and what's true, what's important behind that debate?
No, there is page 39 of the book notes how it was in a way an admission of failure, the fact that when some European countries got into a crisis, Europe had to call the IMF. Not so much because the IMF had the money and Europe did not have it, but essentially because some European countries were not trusting the European institutions. They felt that the European institution would be too lenient with respect to some countries, to respect to crisis countries, and that they would not be able to enforce fiscal discipline, for example. That, in a way, is very sad. It's something that still worries me, and we still see some aspects of this problem now, because you may know that one of the reasons why we have not yet achieved an agreement on Greece is precisely because some countries insist that we cannot go ahead as Europeans unless the IMF is on board. And that's an admission of, again, lack of unity. So I think we need to do something about this. I would entirely be in favor of having a European monetary fund. I think we should stop relying on external credibility. I think we need to be credible on our own.
Wow. This is a bit broader issue. Are we, for Enrico, and then obviously Fiorenzo wants to add his own question. There is a debate about how Europe is going to be, apart from the leadership, and Macron and elections are obviously going to take place in Germany and Italy very soon. The question is, are we going to have a core Europe calling the shots, let's say? And so where is, if is that true, this is true, and if it's a good thing, what is the role of Italy there? This is a question for Enrico.
In an ideal world, Italy has to be in the first row, leading, as we did since the beginning, since the Treaty of Rome, since the Maastricht period. I would like just to remind three important steps in European history. The Treaty of Rome was not chosen because of tourism or because of, was chosen because after the failure of the Communauté Européenne de la Défense, Italy and the Benelux countries took the leadership and achieved this big relaunch, having the treaties of Rome and so on and so forth. Second, the single act in 1985 at the European level, that was the main achievement for the single market. In 1985, it was the Italian leadership, the Milan European Council, that was the place and the way to solve the problem and to launch this great 10 years perspective. Third, Maastricht. December 90, the European Council in Rome, under the Italian leadership, was the one who put, if I may say, Margaret Thatcher in a corner and was able to launch all the process of the Maastricht Treaty. So Italy was always there, and Italy has to be there. Is a duty, I think, is a mission for us. This is why we, the Italians, we have to consider our next decisions, our next steps, our next elections, not only in an inward-looking mood, in an inward-looking and very domestic and parochial approach. We have to consider that we have a mission for Europe. And the mission for Europe is that without our leadership, without Italy on board, European relaunch will be different and will be, I think, weaker. This is why I hope the Italian debate, the Italian discussion can bring us in a situation in which on many of these fields, Italy can be really in the first row. And it depends, of course, on how to be serious, how to be accountable on budget, on many subjects of the budget. There are many issues in which I think what would be a very good decision, if I may say, and I'm sorry to say that publicly to Carlo, but the first decision should be to ask Carlo to be back to Italy, not to Cremona.
He's going back. He's going back.
But not to Cremona, to Via 20 Settembre, being there and having a very big legitimacy and big support in his very important work. That is the key, because if Carlo has a successful work in what Carlo was doing some years ago, the Germans, they can trust in us. We can be considered as accountable, and we can oblige them to go towards all the reforms that European Union needs.
Thank you, Rico. And as you probably all know, Carlo told me that he was actually going back to Italy. In October, I think the meetings, the international monetary meetings that we're going to have in October are going to be his last, at least in his current role. And he's going back to Milan, right, for a few months, probably. So he keeps us waiting to know something more about his future steps. Do you have anything to add about your vision of it, or what would you like to do and achieve when you're back?
No, I mean, I mentioned also this to Enrico when I met him last time. I would like to set up, actually he was the one who suggested the name Osservatorio sui conti pubblici italiani, a sort of not just think tank that makes writes theoretical study, but something that promotes some ideas of good management of the fiscal accounts in Italy. I'm pretty close to the completion of the initial phase of this project, so I think it will start on November 1st. Not yet there, but I'm confident that we can do it.
And
please, Carlo, November 1st and not November the 2nd as date of start.
Yes.
We're still a little bit superstitious. And Enrico,
could I?
Yes, Renzo, dai, please, yes. Go ahead.
Yes, no, I wanted to put this into a wider context, because Italy is important, of course, for us, it's important for Europe, but I would like to throw a couple of fireworks up in the air. There is a book which I recommend reading. I think it's called The Golden Palace, and it's by a man called MacDonald, nothing to do with hamburgers. Anyway, the thesis is, and I think there is some truth in that the United States is becoming very rapidly a third world economy, where there is 15 to 20% of citizens who are impoverished below the poverty line. The middle class is disappearing. There are ultra-rich. I lived in Russia in the times of Putin the First. It was like, it's becoming very similar to Russia. That's probably why Trump, who is of limited, shall we say, knowledge of economy and society and a few other things, but he's impressed by the Russian. Well, this is a problem. The middle class is disappearing, and this book, in fact, criticized rather harshly the model of the Harvard Business School. In other words, the important thing are the shareholders. So we don't care about the workers, we don't care about the future. As long as the shareholders are happy, things will solve themselves automatically. This is, of course, something which even Keynes in his time understood to be totally absurd. But now the point is this: we cannot really, and I agree with Merkel, we cannot really rely on the US leadership, the American leadership. I live in the United States. I admired, especially when I was very young, the United States. Now I admire it a little less. And the United States is becoming a country where a tiny minority is becoming exceedingly rich and practicing what Keynes, to mention again, called the economy of the casino. It's a giant casino. And as for the rest, the middle class is impoverished, students are full of debts, and then they have mortgages to buy the property if they can afford it, which is a big if. Then they have to pay the debts of their children if they have children. So the model, the American model, I'm sorry, but is finished. We can learn a lot from the United States. We have to be grateful because thanks to the United States, we live in a free part of Europe. There is no question about that. However, is there an alternative to that? Question number one. Question number two is, what are we going to do about Russia? Why Russia? In this, I think that even if his analysis is non-existent, Trump is right. We should engage Russia. I know, for example, the central banker, the governor, I know, and I think, in my humble opinion, is doing an excellent job. She's called Elvira Nabiulina. She's a Tartar. She comes from a working class. Her mother, and she tells everybody, was cleaning up, floors, and the father was a worker. Anyway, Nabiulina is the only person, as far as I know, who can tell Putin, you cannot do that, we are doing that. And the ruble has stabilized. In fact, it has appreciated, I think, in the last couple of years. So apart from this monetary aspect, Russia is partly a European country, up to the Urals, I would say, potentially. The democracy is very imperfect. But how can Europeans engage Russia in a constructive way?
Thank you, Renzo. And then I will, I just want to remind that we're going to have an answer on that, but I think Enrico should leave us in probably few minutes. And so I wanted also to make sure that the audience can have at least one question for him. So we can actually have a mic, and you can raise your hands. And probably what we can do to simplify this is to have like a couple of questions together so that Enrico can, it's not easy, but can give us like a full answer to more questions. Maybe that was also helpful. So we're gonna keep in mind the Russia issue, and then we have 2 and 3 friends here. Okay, let's start. Who is first? Maybe you.
Hello, my name is Ivan Butin. I'm a consultant at the World Bank Group. I would like to ask a question about the future of European politics. I like very much the idea of assigning the soon former probably UK seats in the European Parliament for the pan-European election. Going further, what do you think about, this is maybe probably for Prime Minister Letta, the emergence of pan-European parties, meaning a party that is founded on a European level, which has branches in the national countries. How far are we from that? And is there something to be welcomed, or we should just start building on the existing parties, making the coalition like the European Socialist Party, the European People's Party, or should we have also new, truly European parties with national branches?
So, could you hear us well, Enrico? Good. And then we have maybe a second one, and then we're gonna ask Enrico to answer.
Hello. So I see that you all seem to agree on where Europe has to go, and the economy, the issues ahead. But I wonder how much time you guys spend on social networks, and you see, our fellow countrymen, Italians, discuss there, and they live in a world of their own in terms of perception of what Europe is and the euro, and it's really a different planet. And people vote, and when they vote for parties that have nothing to do with whatever you guys have been talking about today. I'm thinking of Lega Nord, Le Pen in France. I'm thinking about UKIP in the UK, and the Five Star Movement, of course. The question is, the election only work if there are common values, and you want to decide on the nuances. But we have a bigger threat here. There is the populist movements. They can really wreak havoc in what's going on here. So, and I think that the discussion today has sort of swiped the dust under the rug.
No, okay, no, it's good. That's why we are having questions. Maybe we can go ahead with this too, because I think it raises 2 important topics. One is a stronger or single European party? And the second is, are we really forgetting about populism threat and what people feel about that?
Maybe I start with this second question is about the problem of leadership, I think, and is a way to rediscuss about what we said some minutes ago about leadership. Because the key point is that it is true that in our public opinion, there are discussions that are based, I mentioned what is my own experience on Italy about, for instance, debt, euro, the figures, and so on and so forth. So there's really, there's a base that is not a common one, and there's a problem there. My point is, we have to consider that today being a leader doesn't mean being follower of your followers. We have, in this very period, in some countries, and if I may say Italy is one of them, the idea that leader is the one who is the best follower of his own followers. It is not leadership. Leadership means to say something that in the moment in which you say that is not considered as the mood, is not considered as the mainstream. But the leader wins when his idea becomes stronger and stronger, and then convinces the people, as Macron said, and as Macron did. I repeat and I underline the point of Macron. Macron, the French situation, today we are all discovering France as a pro-European country. But I used to live in France in the last 2 years, teaching here in Sciences Po and working at the Jacques Delors Institute and so on and so forth. And the feeling in France was the feeling that Marine Le Pen was really being at the very core of the French mood, of the French goat, or the idea that France was exactly in the mood of this anti-European approach. And Macron was the only leader in the last 6 months, 9 months of the electoral campaign, taking the European flag and without any big guru of elections, of electoral campaign, saying that I believe in Europe, and if you want to follow me, you have to follow this flag. And he won. He won. He won in a situation in which the European flag was absolutely marginalized. So my point is, leadership, I repeat, it is not being follower of your follower. If you are follower of your followers, you are a follower. You are not a leader. You are a multiple follower. You are not a leader. The point about European parties, I think it should be the final point of a big development, a big evolution. But this evolution can start only from one point, as the one I mentioned before, so the election of the 73 new members of the European Parliament elected in a pan-European constituency. The need to mix voters, and elected people, and to avoid this situation of national democracy that is not creating European leaderships and European political approaches. The main problem started in Europe when the main European institution became the European Council instead of the European Commission and the European Parliament. If Europe is under the leadership of the European Council, and as you know, the European Council is the meeting of all the European leaders. In the meeting of the European Council, there's one European leader with a European job. that is the president of the European Council. All the other members, they have a national job, national legitimacy. If the European Commission and the European Parliament are marginalized and the European Union is under the leadership of the European Council, we will fail in the future. This is why I strongly hope and I strongly believe this idea about the seats in the European Parliament can start this process of having European parties, because in this kind of situation, European parties will be decisive to be able to present an idea. And of course, European parties mean European leaders. And European leaders are today people that they have to be aware that their leadership can be spent not only at national level, but also at European level. This is why many hopes from Macron achievement in France, many hopes from what can happen in Germany, and of course, if I may say, I continue strongly to hope, contro venti e maree, that Italy too can be successful. And if I may say, I would like really to thank you all, Antonella, Carlo, Renzo, and all of you for this great opportunity, and I promise you to be in Washington very soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So probably Enrico has to leave us. Of course, we are all here. I don't know how long Carlo can stay with us today. If you have questions to ask him directly, we can have. Now, obviously, we're all friends here. So if there is a question for Carlo, as while Enrico is leaving us.
Good afternoon, everybody. Gianluca Mele, World Bank. Thank you for this very insightful session. My question is something that Mr. Cottarelli mentioned before, is about convergence. One of the revolutions of the European integration and the treaties, the process of integration, was the free movement of people and goods throughout the entire continent. At the same time, if we look at the European experiment after roughly 15 years, since the very beginning of 2000, if we look specifically at income convergence, for example, it's fundamentally a failure. It's a mirage. The level of the retribution of labor in different countries varies considerably. Now, why this happens? Because we face very unique challenges. If you look at other cases of states that confederated, even in the US, Latin America, or to some extent in West Africa, the barriers, and I think Prime Minister Letta mentioned this before, including the language, the barriers that we face are very unique. Now, my question is this solvable? Like, are these barriers structural enough not to be solved? And as a corollary, as a second question, Stiglitz a couple of weeks ago came out with a new book, and among the many things that he says, he talks about an old concept of 2 or 3 Europes. Is that the solution? Thank you.
But if I don't think that Stiglitz intended to use the 2, 3 Europes with that meaning. But as we have not yet mentioned the issue of multi-speed Europe, I'll take this as an opportunity to mention the fact that the book, Enrico's book, is clearly emphasizes the fact that we cannot go on with the unanimity rule, and we need to move to a multi-speed Europe in which there are some countries that move ahead faster. I know that this is not what Stiglitz meant, but I wanted to take this as an excuse to mention this point, which has not been mentioned in the earlier discussion. Your question is a very important one. The language barrier remains a barrier. At the same time, we see that many Italians over the last few years have actually left Italy to work elsewhere in Europe. So I guess this is becoming less of a less important barrier. I see another problem that is more difficult to tackle, which is related to what I mentioned earlier, the fact that some countries, including Italy, entered Europe believing that they continue to do what they were doing before. For example, keeping inflation higher than abroad, keeping wage increases not in line with increases in productivity. And this happened in Italy, it happened in Portugal, it happened in Spain, it happened to some extent also in France. And this created a very problem that gave rise to the 2008, 2011, 2012 crisis of the euro area. The fact that because of this, countries, instead of convergence, would diverge. Some countries would gain competitiveness, others would lose competitiveness. And so we end up in this situation in which in 1999, Italy's per capita GDP was 4% lower than Germany's per capita GDP. And now it's almost 25% lower. But this is not because, that's at least my view, that's not because necessarily it had to end up in this way. Not because necessarily Italy and Germany cannot share the same countries. But because it happened in that particular period between 2000 and 2007, that the policies that were followed were very different in the two countries, that Italy thought we could continue. There was also a pretty large fiscal expansion in Italy when the opposite should have happened to cool down inflation. So policy mistakes were made. Stiglitz probably believed that there is inherently an impossibility between Italy and Germany to share the same currency. I don't agree. I think that the policy mistakes were made. By the way, in terms of flows, we're actually moving in the right direction in terms of convergence, because now unit labor costs in Germany are increasing, Spain and Portugal are declining. Actually, Portugal has managed to catch up what it had lost between 2000 and 2008 in terms of competitiveness. Italy and France are still lagging behind. But I don't think there is, that's why I was referring to teething problems. We started in the wrong way. It did not have to happen necessarily. I think in the future it should not happen. It may not, and I think we really need to solve this stock competitiveness issues in terms of stocks. In terms of flows, it has been solved. And it's not impossible, while remaining, of course, in the euro area.
Questions from the audience? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jorge Lopez from the World Bank, and my question is related to the fact that, I mean, it's something that I read about, and it's like the fiscal integration of Europe. I don't know if it's if you think that it may be like a necessary condition for the sustainability in the long term of the European Union, and particularly of the euro, or if you think that the mechanisms that we have in place are enough to keep the euro afloat in the medium and the long term.
Mm. I think that, and I wrote about this several years ago already, I think that the euro area would work better if there were a larger central budget. That's also the message of Enrico's book. The McDougall report a few decades ago argued that, which was meant to address explicitly this question, concluded that it would help the working of the monetary area to have a central budget of the order of 7% of GDP or 10% of GDP, including defense. The euro area budget, the European budget is now 1% of GDP. This is about 20 times to 30 times smaller of what normally happens in a fiscal federation. I'm not saying that we should move to the same size to a centralization similar to fiscal federation, which has achieved political unity. But I think it will be time to centralize a certain policy. Enrico's book talks about, for example, centralizing unemployment benefits. Now, why would this be helpful to the working of a monetary area, of the euro area? For a number of reasons. First of all, if you centralize certain policies, you make sure that those policies are not mismanaged at the local level, in a different way at the local level. Second, if you have a central budget where you centralize spending, cyclically sensitive spending and revenues, you essentially have centralized the working of automatic stabilizers, which probably can be fully allowed to operate, something that perhaps a single country that is subject to tight budget constraints would not be able to do. And finally, and this is perhaps in my view one of the most important reasons, if you centralize certain tax policies and spending policies, you help the structural convergence of the various economies. What do I mean? If you have an unemployment benefit that is common to all the area, all labor markets become more similar. And perhaps it will foster the convergence of other aspects of the labor market. If you have a single taxation of enterprises, then you create a level playing field in which investment would be located in Europe, not because of tax reasons, but because of economic reasons. So all countries will become more similar to one another from a structural point of view if we centralize a certain policy. So that, I think, remains a very important challenge, to increase the size of the European budget by centralizing certain policies on the tax side and on the spending side.
If you have questions? You will also, I'm sure that Enrico Letta would not mind if we remind you that probably we're going to have another, the first book by Carlo being published soon in English.
About public debt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you tell us if it's expected? We haven't organized
Beginning
this,
of
but I know
September.
that beginning of September, and it's going to be published by
Brookings.
Brett Brookings. And the title of the book?
What we owe. So it's about public debt. So it's
Good.
public debt is something that we all owe. It's not something that is an abstract entity owes to somebody. No, it's our debt.
And it's going to be not only like Italy,
It's not
but
only
like in the
about
previous
Italy,
books,
it's also
but-
about other advanced economies.
Okay, so maybe it's good to remember. It's in September, so we may have time. So we're going to have a big party, farewell party. So I think that we can wrap it up. We have actually had some very good piece of, first of all, food for thought, but mostly also some quite piece of news, we can say. In the end, you know that we have outside not only copies of the book, but just some of you have already had a glass of orange juice, some cookies, something to sustain yourself, since it's almost, it's actually lunchtime here in America, not in Italy, but it's okay. So thank you everybody for coming with and joining us and being with us today. The full recording of the event will be available on Facebook page of the US-Italy Forum and also on the website. So if you want to go through it again for something that then or share it, it's going to be there available there, and maybe some other videos as well. So thank you for coming. And thank you, first of all, to Renzo, who is still in London with us. And Renzo, thank you for your outspoken questions and very, very important messages that you sent us from there. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you.
Is that one problem is the culture of debt, which is ingrained in the United States, in Britain, in other countries. I read constantly about debt-ridden Italy. In fact, Italy has a high propensity for private saving still. And so it's unfair to put the two things together without making the distinction. The culture of too many Western countries is to run into that, thinking that this will create jobs and create the economy. It will create also personal bankruptcies. And perhaps in schools, in universities, and in the media, we should make this message very clear.
Thank you. Thank you,
That's
Renzo.
my final point.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you. Of course, Chiara and Daniele, who put us the panel together.